y también a todos los chilenos y chilenas que hoy reciben esta noticia con pesar y dolor.
Okay. What he said there is interesting, and it tells you the importance of commas. Actually, is what he said is to all the Chileans who receive this news with sadness and pain, which is not the same thing as to all of the Chileans, comma, who receive this message with sadness and pain. Está como tácitamente reconociendo que gran parte del país se está riendo de esta. No le importa nada porque, bueno, andan cagados por estos putos incendios. Hello and welcome, hola y bienvenido al canal Gaviota Brava, to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel, where we're going to be doing, this is going to be a bit more of a bilingual stream than we usually do, porque tenemos la media noticia, se murió el segundo Pinochet. Sebastián Piñera, former Chilean dictator and one of the most hated people in the country, has died, which basically only happened because he'd be alive right now if the current government had followed up on their promises to prosecute him for all the atrocities he'd committed during his last time in government. But they let him get off scot-free, and impunity, it turns out, is not good for you. I'm just going to show you a sampling of what popular opinion in Chile is of this guy. This is not right now. This is from during the uprising a couple of years ago. Conche tu madre, asesino, igual que Pinochet. They're singing, "Fuck you, Piñera, you're a murderer just like Pinochet." And if you Google, if you search this in YouTube, Piñera conche tu madre, asesino igual que Pinochet, you will find video of large crowds all over the country, full stadiums, singing this all up and down. It was such a fucking hit song. It has its own melody. Look, they're playing. They got instrumental accompaniment here. They got brass. Because Piñera is a national hate figure, and for the benefit of people who don't know Chile, which is, I would imagine, a lot of people in chat, because outside of Chile, the reporting in English in particular is absolutely terrible. I'm just gonna introduce people, first of all, just to a little bit about who this fucking guy is. Or was, because now he's a past tense asshole now. Okay, so his first big thing, he comes from a rich-ass family, and that includes, his brothers include a shitty musician by the name of, Negro Piñera, hi, River Rune, a University of Chicago economist who is responsible to a great extent for just how shitty things are in Chile, José Piñera, and then there's him, Sebastián. And Sebastián, his big thing, before he really got into politics, see, in the early 80s, Pinochet had the idea, thanks to Sebastián's brother and a bunch of other Chicago boys, had the idea of privatizing and deregulating the banking system. And Sebastián realized that you could, this was the perfect time if you wanted to pull off an embezzlement scheme, screw lots of people out of their savings, and walk away with a shit ton of cash. This would be a great time to do it. And indeed, it was. He embezzled a bunch of money from the Banco de Talca in the sort of southern central region of the country, And he was almost sent to prison for it, except that the dictatorship's Minister of Justice, Monica Madariaga, interceded personally for him. This is basically how he made his money. I mean, he came from money. That's important to keep in mind. It's not like he came from nothing and then, managed to make a whole bunch of money through the hard graft of embezzling money from the Banco de Talca. Um, but so he made his money profiting off of the dictatorship, in which his brother was a leading economic advisor. I mean, nothing untoward there. Then he ends up owning Lanchile, the main national flagship airline, where he was a really nasty union buster. Also, Chilevisión, one of the major television networks, which you'll be surprised to hear it did not exactly have sort of a nuanced view of him when he died. And so he was known for the brutal repression of the student movement back the first time he was president, back about 13 years ago, more or less. And then he left office in just absolute disgrace after that. But because the ruling class in Chile, just like in the U.S., they've run out of ideas for the most part. And so they just kind of dish up reruns. And so he ended up standing for the presidency again, and he ended up in office starting in 2018. And in 2019, well, no, he got elected in 2018, I think it was. Let me just make absolutely certain. No, 2017. So, okay. And he came in and he was basically doing the usual thing, which is to give huge money, basically gift estate assets to his mates, as he did. But, at the same time, somebody's got to pay for all those gifts to Piñera's mates and cousins and people. Like, I mean, he had, like, the thing about Chilean politics is, like, everybody's somebody's fucking cousin. Like, I mean, the surnames don't change from one generation to the next because it's just like the sons and daughters of the people who were in those seats in the parliament a couple of years ago. I mean, the level of nepotism is impressive. It would embarrass the British royal family. But anyway, his cousin was Home Secretary, so there's this decision to raise the metro fare in Santiago by 30 pesos. Not a lot of money in the scheme of things, but a lot of money if you're living on the sort of incomes you can live on in Chile, which are like way less than $1,000 a month. And don't think that it's like a lot of places where, yeah, the wages are really low, but the prices are actually also low on a lot of things. No. Like, I can tell you, having spent time in Chile, that actually a lot of really basic stuff, like food and things like that, costs about the same as it does in the US and Western Europe. Yeah, except that most people don't make anywhere near as much. So people literally are going into debt. Like, when you buy shit with a card at the supermarket, the first thing you have to answer, it will ask you how many installments you want to pay it in. People are literally buying fucking food on installment plan. So okay, so there's secondary students who have been absolutely the backbone of every uprising in this whole cycle of escalating mobilizations in Chile over the past decade, even longer. They kick off and they start a mass fare evasion campaign, start dodging fares and stuff like that. Piñera then sort of cracks down, and the entire fucking country, after like these attacks on the secondary students and their fare evasion campaign, just already rises up. I mean, just absolutely nobody was having it. And that's when Piñera manages to go from a normal bent asshole president of Chile to being a historically bloodthirsty asshole. Like, because in the last 2 years he was in office, the number of extrajudicial executions actually on a month-on-month basis exceeded the last decade of Pinochet's rule. The same with cases of torture and things like that. I mean, it started out like Piñera goes, okay, so the multiple metro stations burn it. And nobody takes responsibility for this. There's like nobody's knows who did it. Everybody's kind of looking someplace else. This isn't like what happened with the uprising in 2020, where like a community went and actually just took out the third precinct in Minneapolis. This is a fucking mystery on a certain level, though in general it is widely believed that probably it was Piñera. Amongst other things, not him personally, but somebody on his behalf. Amongst other things, the thing to know about these metro stations is they were surrounded, utterly just full of military police at the time. The Metro Workers Union points this out. Not only that, so they, the thing is, underground stations are actually kind of hard to burn down. Because they're underground, they don't have a whole lot of air. That makes it really difficult for a fire to actually stay lit. So, then, a prosecutor is in charge of the investigation and actually says, this looks like a professional job. This was not done from outside the station. This wasn't somebody, like, chucking a petrol bomb in and it just went off. This was done by somebody who had a very clear knowledge of the layout of the station. The fires originated in restricted areas, and they required a substantial amount of accelerant to even get started. Much more than anybody would be just able to carry on their person inconspicuously. And all this happened while these things were full of military police. Not only that, there are films. There's mobile footage people shot of military police running out of these stations shortly before smoke starts pouring out of them. Like, so, I mean, there are serious question marks around that. But he uses this as an excuse to declare a state of emergency, which, and then he, illegally, without seeking the approval of the Congress, which he had to do, sends the military out. And to the extent that anyone had any illusions in Chile about the military changing who they were, how they do things, since the last time they were allowed to just run wild on the streets of the country, those illusions were utterly shattered within 24 hours. Because they immediately did the exact same shit they did under Pinochet. They started just murdering people. People just kept turning up dead. You had all sorts of, it was like 37 people who were definitely extrajudicially executed by the military or the military police. You had a fairly significant number of deaths in very suspicious circumstances. Like, officially, they died in a fire. There was no proper investigation. Nobody tried to preserve the scene. Nobody looked at trace evidence. There was no forensic investigation at all. And the families would, arrange for, like, independent pathologists to check out the bodies, and they would find that they had bullet holes in them. And in at least one case that I know of, an actual bullet. And on top of that, they were in places that were miles away from any place that they would ever have been expected to be. Like, the official explanation is that these people were looting, and then they got caught while they set a fire while they were in there. Except, these were not exactly people who you would expect to find looting. And they were in places that were miles away from any place that they would have any reason to be. On the opposite end of town. In places where it's not really clear what they'd even be looting. And there were lots of cases like this. And cases where, at one point a shopping mall in the north of Santiago, people started to hear, the military and the military police had taken it over, and people in the area were hearing like screams and stuff and seeing people dragged in by the soldiers. That it was very clearly all indications pointed to it being used as a torture center. And the minute this starts being discussed, wow, what do you know? Shit starts burning down. And meanwhile, I mean, the military police went on an absolute just torture and mutilation spree. Like they were shooting people's eyes out so frequently that, I mean, if you look at footage of the protests, you will see everybody's wearing like high grade goggles, because everybody knew there was a real chance that you would get blinded by shotgun fire, like less lethal shotgun fire, if you went to these protests. So people, I mean, the entire country was selling out of these goggles and everything. I mean, and there's just so much of this. There are like thousands of political prisoners. And, I mean, it really looked like Piñera was going to fall for a while. He was kind of saved from that by a deal that, among other things, involved the guy who's the current president, the so-called leftist president, Gabriel Boric. I mean, I mean, this guy, Piñera, had approval ratings that were within the margin of error of 0. Like, literally, like, I mean, we're talking less than 5% approvals, negatives through the fucking roof. That's the guy we're talking about. Y ahora vamos a ver, lo que dicen los medios chilenos de este hueón nefasto. Primero, el presidente Boric. I'm gonna try to sort of switch back and forth to follow this up, so that people who are not Spanish speakers are also understanding what's going on. But let me see. Okay, presidente Boric por muerte de Sebastián Piñera. Fue un demócrata desde la primera hora. He was a Democrat from the start. He's talking about Sebastián Piñera, the guy who did all the shit I was just telling you about. Who has a human rights record that actually, like, one of Boric's campaign promises had to be anybody who wanted to actually win the presidency in Chile after Piñera kind of had to say that they were going to be charging this motherfucker for the atrocities he committed. And now he's saying, fue un demócrata desde la primera hora. Ok, vamos a ver lo que dice el señorito Boric de este weón tan nefasto. Anda, weón. Ya, pues. This is Chilevisión, also known as Piñera's own channel. This is like Fox News reporting on the death of, like, Rupert Murdoch, just to give you some context here. Ahora cárgate, po. Ya, po. Come on. Piñera, conche tu madre, asesino.
Yo hablo a mi título personal. No lo conocí personalmente.
A ver. Oh, wow. Glaucoma vision. Is that the best fucking...
Yo hablo a mi título personal. No lo conocí personalmente. Para la pandemia sí me tocó. Yo soy experto en prevención de riesgo.
Gabriel Boric, las declaraciones que entrega.
Y en luta como país en circunstancias especialmente difíciles.
En luta el país, weón. Como si tus amigos fueran el país, weón.
Por la tragedia de los incendios que justo en estos días ha golpeado a muchos de nuestros compatriotas.
Sí, sí, los incendios que casi no salen en los medios chilenos, porque todo el mundo, todos los canales están hablando del fallecimiento de este ahueonado. Like, okay, Chile is a country that, largely because of the combination of water theft and the destruction of native forest and the planting of invasive monocultures, is constantly on fire. And right now there is a horrible fire that has affected affected a whole lot of people in the 5th region, which is one of the major coastal areas by Viña del Mar and Valparaíso. And there have been like 100 people who have died, and a whole lot of people are missing. Huge numbers of people have been left homeless by this. Chile, it's worth noting, spends huge amounts of money on their air force. An air force that has only ever been used against Chile. But whenever something like this happens, they have to go off and beg another country to borrow their super tanker, because they have no use for a fucking air force, but they've got got one. but nobody wants to invest any of that money in anything to deal with the problem they do have, which is constant forest fires.
Con profundo pesar quiero expresar mis condolencias, que se las transmití personalmente a sus hijas, a su familia, a todos sus cercanos y a quienes fueron parte de sus 2 gobiernos.
Sí, lo que fueron parte de sus 2 gobiernos, o sea, varios encargados reos, weón. Varios delincuentes, varios asesinos. Incluso su primo, el conche su madre Chadwick, weón. Yeah, he says condolences to the people who are part of his 2 governments. I mean, like, seriously, there are criminal charges actually pending that nothing has been done about against the members of his most recent government because of their involvement in all this shit.
En especial, hago llegar un cariñoso abrazo fraterno a su esposa Cecilia Morel, a sus hijos Magdalena, Cecilia, Sebastián y Cristóbal. Y también a todos los chilenos y chilenas que hoy reciben esta noticia con pesar y dolor.
Okay, what he said there is interesting, and it tells you the importance of commas, actually, because what he said is, to all the Chileans who receive this news with sadness and pain, which is not the same thing as to all of the Chileans, comma, who receive this message with sadness and pain. Está como tácitamente reconociendo que gran parte del país se está riendo de esta weá. O no le importa nada porque, bueno, andan cagados por estos putos incendios.
He instruido que el expresidente Sebastián Piñera sea despedido con los honores de funeral de Estado.
Yeah, un funeral de Estado, weón. Este weón nefasto. He's giving him a fucking state funeral. This guy, I mean, the last time they did the state funeral theater, it was for Patricio Aylwin, the guy who was president, the first one after Pinochet, at the very beginning of the transition to democracy, which continues now, and never seems to actually arrive at democracy. But it was, they tried to pull out all the stops. They wanted to show just how popular this guy was. He was horrible and not very popular because he's a big part of creating the conditions to allow everything Pinochet did to stand. And it was just completely, I mean, there was no sign of any kind of public mourning. Nobody gave a shit.
Decretado 3 días de duelo nacional para honrar la memoria de quien fuera electo presidente de Chile en 2...
Para honrar su memoria, ¿qué tal la memoria de la gente que fue asesinada por él? ¿Qué tal la memoria de la gente que está presa hoy mismo por resistir a su dictadura, weón? ¿Qué tal la gente que fue asesinada, que se murió en circunstancias más sospechosas que la cresta, que nunca han sido objeto de investigación alguna. La memoria de este weón no hay nada, no tiene ningún honor, weón, esta memoria. Es la memoria de un delincuente que luego se convirtiera en asesino, weón.
Dos oportunidades. Para ello, he designado a nuestro ministro de Relaciones Exteriores, Alberto Van Claveren, encargado del comité para la organización de un funeral de estas características. El presidente Piñera contribuyó desde su visión a construir grandes acuerdos por el bien de la patria.
Grandes acuerdos por el bien de la patria, conche tu madre, weón. Grandes acuerdos por el bien de la patria. Grandes acuerdos por el bien de su propia empresa, weón. I mean, he said these big agreements for the good of the fatherland. And it's like, motherfucker, one of his biggest things was a fisheries act that turned out to be bought and paid for. Like, literally, the people in Congress who sponsored it were on the take, actually received. It was very much a quid pro quo situation. But what it did was just hand over the fisheries, including in regions where people are living on living from small-scale artisanal fishing, to foreign companies and large domestic corporations from outside the region, and just completely screwed over huge numbers of poor people in these fishing communities, especially in the South. I mean, like, the thing to know is that eso de los grandes acuerdos, the big agreements, this is a theme. This is what the ruling class loves to talk about in Chile. It's all about, because their version of what happened that made the coup happen is that there weren't big agreements between all of the responsible rich people about how things were supposed to work. And so it became a conflict. And so they say never again means that we and the outright fascists are going to just come up with big agreements that are great for the country, by which they mean their own bank accounts and their relatives and friends. Lo grande acuerdo, weón.
Fue un demócrata desde la primera hora.
Un demócrata desde la primera hora. Un demócrata. Nunca, este weón, Piñera, nunca pudo acordarse de si votó en el 89 por el sí o por el no. Hay dos versiones de la weá. Lo que sí se sabe es que se enriqueció, se acumuló su fortuna durante la dictadura y fue beneficiario directo de esa dictadura. I mean, calling him a Democrat from the very start, it is so fucking bullshit. Because, like, there are two different versions. He could never completely decide whether he actually voted for yes for continuing Pinochet's rule or no for, like, getting rid of him. There are different versions about that. Like, I mean, calling this guy a Democrat, like, it's one thing to say, you know, the perfunctory official thing and, you know, all the protocol stuff, but there is absolutely no need. He doesn't have to say this shit. It is absolutely just pathetic. This guy is the guy that, Vosh, it's worth remembering, he got really excited. A socialist is going to be president of Chile. You know, and Jacobin was talking about it too. And, like, if they'd ever actually listened to anyone in the Chilean left, they'd know that the Chilean left hates this guy. Like, he literally couldn't go near a protest because people would yell at him because he's a prick, and because he's always been on the side of the cops and not really with the protesters.
Y buscó genuinamente lo que él creía que era lo mejor para el país.
Lo que él creía que era lo mejor para el país. What he thought was the best for the country. Sí, y lo que él creía era lo mejor para el país fue justamente llenar de plata ajena su bolsillo, weón.
Como por ejemplo, cuando asumió la reconstrucción del país después del terremoto del 27 de febrero del año 2010.
La sí, sí, la gran reconstrucción que dejó tirada a la gente de Aysén, weón. Y luego cuando la gente de Aysén salió a protestar porque no había recibido, bueno, subsidio al combustible y todo lo necesario para reconstruir sus vidas, mandó a batallones de Paco a reprimirlo. Like, I mean, he's just talking about the reconstruction after the fucking earthquake in 2010. And the thing is that, I mean, okay, he basically completely screwed over the people who were harmed by the earthquake, especially in the south, in the far south, in the region called Aysén. They got completely screwed because they're in the middle of nowhere. It is it is more than a day's drive to get there from Santiago. And these people desperately need things like fuel, which is hard to get, and it's very expensive because of the transport costs for everything. So they needed a subsidy on the fuel. Instead, what they got was this Fisheries Act that I was talking about that screwed them over even more. And so they decided to protest about the fact that they were still living in fucking tents and shit, a year, 2 years after this. And, being denied any kind of assistance. And what Piñera did was send 1,000 military police from Santiago to go and crush them. I mean, it was absolutely brutal, and it was, I was in Chile at the time, so I was getting this live, because one of the things they have in Chile is community radio, often illegal community radio, but it is extremely popular. Huge numbers of people listen to it. It's all very listener supported, very closely connected to the community. And so there was Radio Santa Maria in Coyhaique, in the far south where this is all going on, and they were providing live on the scene reporting. And one of the things the military police kept on trying to do was cut their internet connection. I mean, it was so impressive what the comrades in these community radios did at the time, because they had a cadena. They created a network where Radio Santa Maria would report, and it would be broadcast in real time by these community radio stations all over the fucking country. So people were hearing all about it, and hearing about the absolutely heroic resistance of the people in Aysén. I mean, it was it was absolutely amazing what they pulled off in terms of resistance. They're these small, close-knit communities who know that they are out of sight and out of mind to much of the rest of the country because they're off in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, they held off the military police for like weeks. And there was you'll get an idea of how small the fucking place is. How small these communities are. They had one representative of the military police there. And after the military police, who had been sent by Piñera from the north, had spent several days getting their asses kicked, having their shit just chucked off of bridges, because a lot of these places are on islands, so the only way to get there is on these narrow bridges, and people would just push their shit off the bridge or barricade the bridge, and the community would bring the people manning the barricades, soup and wood for heating and stuff like that, and cooking. So the military police who were brought in go to the local cop and they say, "Come on, help us out here." And a guy I know who was there at the time, he's from there. He tells me what the cop said was, "Fuck you, man. You're gonna be going back to Santiago after this. I have to live here." And he refused to help him out because, he literally could not imagine what it would be like to live in one of these tiny communities with everybody knowing that when they were fighting for their lives, fighting for just basic needs that were being denied them, and getting, and having this army of military police sent down to them, that he decided to take, Piñera's side. So talking about the fucking 2010 earthquake, conche tu madre, weón. I'm learning to hate Boric all over again.
o cuando se la jugó con mucha decisión y audacia para rescatar a los 33 mineros de la mina.
Conche tu madre, no se la jugó para nada, weón. Siempre viniendo con estos 33 mineros. Esos 33 mineros solo quedaron atrapados por la mala situación de seguridad en la minería chilena que existe gracias a hueones como él. Él no hizo nada más que lavar su imagen. ¿Acaso él rescató a esos hueones? ¿Acaso él hizo algo? Bueno, se posicionó frente a las cámaras para hablar de los 33 y leer esa famosa carta de los 33 mineros, weón. Like, okay, he just said he took all these risks to save the 33 miners who got stuck, and it is like, that is such bullshit. It is so impressive. First of all, he didn't fucking do anything. He stood in front of TV cameras. He wasn't taking any risks at all. I mean, he said that he did this with audacity, and that's right, audacia. He did it with audacity. It's true, because the audacity of taking credit for the rescue of these guys is really impressive. It is serious chutzpah on two levels. One, because Piñera didn't do shit. Like, I mean, he wasn't the one helping these guys. Second of all, the reason these guys got trapped in the mine in the first place is because the absolutely disastrous state of occupational health and safety in Chile, which is thanks to motherfuckers like Piñera. Because they don't want this stuff regulated, because they want the market to decide. And the market decided that sometimes you gotta have 33 miners get trapped. So, I mean, giving him credit for that shit is so fucked up.
San José, o también, más recientemente, en el manejo de la pandemia en tiempo...
En el manejo de... Like, his management of the pandemic was he didn't do anything. His fucking nonce health minister, Paris, went out and said, maybe we don't have to do anything because the virus will mutate and become a good person. He actually said this, el virus va a mutar y convertirse en buena persona. And, like, I mean, meanwhile, the military police were sent out, like, people were fucking starving because there was no relief for, like, working class people whose livelihoods had been wrecked by the pandemic. And so they did what they've always done and set up ollas comunes, like community kitchens, where everybody kind of contributes a little bit of something and everybody helps in cooking and distributing, and they feed the neighborhood. It's mutual aid and solidarity. They are, we could learn a lot. I've been saying this ever since the first time I went to Chile, and even before that, we could learn a lot from the comrades in Chile. What Piñera's contribution there was he would send the military police to bust the heads of the people at the fucking community kitchens. Like, people literally... See, it would be one thing if, they had done something like in Vietnam where they were delivering food and making sure everybody had food when they had to be quarantined. They weren't doing that. If it weren't for the olla comune, esta gente no come. Yeah, like, talking about the management of the pandemic. Concha tu madre. Yeah, the guy who's dead this guy is the current one, who's also he's a pedazo de mierda, weón.
De incertidumbre a nivel mundial. Me he comunicado en estos últimos minutos con los expresidentes Frei, Lagos y Bachelet.
Sí, tres hueones nefastos.
Y todos lamentan profundamente la partida del expresidente Piñera.
Obvio, porque son de la misma cepa, weón. Son de la misma cepa. Son los mismos hueones, ladrones, neoliberales, represores, que han vendido medio país y han reprimido duramente a la gente por oponerse a ello. He's like, oh wow, the former presidents Frei, Lagos, and Bachelet, all of whom just have a huge record of just selling off everything that people need and just handing it over to rich people through privatizations and stuff, and brutally repressing the public when they protest against this. They all also feel terrible about the loss of Piñera. Yeah, this is...
y
¡Qué
harán lo
asco!
posible por participar de sus funerales. Chile somos todos y debemos soñarlo, dibujarlo y construirlo entre todos, dijo Sebastián Piñera al asumir su segundo periodo presidencial.
He just quoted Piñera. And he said, Chile is all of us, and we have to dream it and draw it and build it together. And it's like, no, what? This guy, está hablando de un sanguinario querellado por crímenes de lesa humanidad, como si fuera el profesor Rosa, weón.
El 11 de marzo de 2018. Un fuerte abrazo para su familia y sus seres queridos en estos difíciles momentos.
Las palabras del presidente Gabriel Boric, la primera...
Okay, see, what they've been talking about in Chile is how this is the canonization of Piñera. There's this big joke that the water in Lago Ranco, where his helicopter crashed, must be magic because he went in a criminal and he came out a saint. Oh, it is pathetic. I mean, we're not talking about ancient history. This is a couple of fucking years ago. Like, I mean, this isn't even, there hasn't even been a generational shift. It is a couple of fucking years ago that he was murdering people and making them disappear and all sorts of other fucking horrible shit.
Primera comunicación del mandatario acerca de la muerte del expresidente Sebastián Piñera, confirmando también el decreto...
I mean, he explicitly literally declared war on the country after the uprising began and called them extraterrestrials.
De los funerales de Estado y los 3 días de duelo a raíz de la muerte, luego de un accidente en helicóptero del exmandatario a sus 74 años.
Claro, parte de lo que ha señalado es destacar lo que fue el rol como presidente en la República.
No ha destacado nada de su rol como presidente. ¿Qué tal la ley Longuera? ¿Qué tal el montaje del caso Bomba, weón? ¿Qué tal los muertos en el almacén Kaiser, weón? Like, he's talking about, he's saying that he had just highlighted aspects of his role as president. It's like, no, he had actually, like, erased everything about his role as president. Yeah, he was the U.S.'s stooge, but that isn't, that's, like, not a distinguishing feature. Every president of Chile since 1973 has been just an utter suck-up to the U.S.
Construcción después del terremoto del 27F, cuando se la jugó, dijo, por el rescate de los mineros.
No, there we go, se la jugó por el rescate de los... ¡Qué riesgo! Corrió Piñera al ponerse frente a la telecámara para protagonizarse, no teniendo nada que ver con el rescate de esos mineros. What the hell did he do? What was he was talking about? He like put it all on the line for the rescue of the miners. Like, what did he fucking put on the line?
O lo que fue el manejo de la pandemia, algunos de los hitos que fueron destacados por el propio presidente Gabriel Boric.
Incluso lo destaca como un demócrata desde la primera hora.
See, and it's worth noting, this is Chilevisión. Chilevisión is to Piñera what Fox is to Rupert Murdoch. That's how fucking rich Piñera is as well. He was like, I think he was one of the top 4 richest people in Chile. He was certainly up there. He owns like half the country.
Justamente el parte de lo que informa, lo que califica finalmente al expresidente Sebastián Piñera, el presidente Gabriel Boric.
Claro, también ha señalado ahí que se ha comunicado con los expresidentes Lagos Frey y Bachelet y que harán todo lo posible por estar presente en estos funerales, que ha dicho son funerales de Estado y que va a ser el actual canciller, el expresidente.
Okay, all they're doing is just repeating what he said. Are we going to get something more, or are they just going to keep doing that? Oh, okay. It looks like they're interviewing
También
somebody.
para usted a raíz de la muerte de tardes y del gobierno del expresidente Sebastián Piñera, Rodrigo Delgado. Rodrigo, muy buenas.
Rodrigo Delgado. A ver, no me acuerdo de esto. Okay, a ver, Rodrigo Delgado. Let's see. Okay, he's a fascist. And yeah, he was a ver. Inicio, alcalde, estación central, gestión edilicia, querella, Rodrigo Delgado. Okay. Yeah, Rodrigo Delgado. Okay, he was the one of the home secretaries of Piñera. He was a member of the fascist UDI party. I think Biden. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did send somebody. And among other things, there are these buildings, these extremely unpopular developments, housing estates in the Estación Central neighborhood in Santiago. They call them vertical ghettos because they're these huge tower blocks, and the view is just other tower blocks. Like, there's zero sun. They are set up so that there's, like, basically no sunlight, no natural light coming into them. Absolutely horrible. Just warehousing people. And when he was mayor of Estación Central, Rodrigo Delgado approved that. He was also responsible for he was the person in charge of most directly in charge of a lot of the atrocities that were committed by the regime during the uprising in 2020, 2021. I mean, and 2022. He's like, I mean, he's a scumbag. Este es un delincuente, un asesino.
Buenas tardes, saludarlo en un momento, me imagino, complejo también para usted a raíz de la
Además de
muerte
fascista.
del expresidente.
Sí, momentos duros. Ya estamos viviendo como país momentos durísimos en las últimas 72 horas. Y la verdad es que como sector político, si se quiere, como país nuevamente, y por supuesto también para quienes estuvimos tal vez trabajando a su lado, son momentos muy duros, momentos de mucha incredulidad en un primer momento de la información.
Ah, sí. Oh, puta, pobrecito. I don't. Okay.
Dirigentes sociales, personas que mucha gente, bueno, no para de sonar, aparte de los medios de comunicación, mucha gente que lo conoció, muchos dirigentes sociales, personas que compartieron con él, no
Yeah,
todo funcionario
dirigentes
público, y la
sociales.
verdad
Yeah, sí, de sociedades anónimas. Talking about like social leaders, which is a term you hear a lot in Chile to refer to like social movement figures, except that like you would be really hard pressed to find any social movement in Chile other than like neo-Nazis who think that Piñera had anything worthwhile about him.
es que yo creo que ese es el primer gran legado, creo yo, cuando uno parte
El
de esta
que-
vida, uno tiene que evaluar hasta qué punto la gente lo recuerda y creo que él hoy día es una figura más allá del sector político, tremenda
Una figura más allá del sector político. Una figura más allá del sector político. ¿A dónde la viste, weón? Bueno, en un sentido sí. Ha logrado, es cierto, Piñera unió a Chile. Las encuestas sí lo confirman. Unió a Chile en su propia contra, weón. Este weón que en un momento tenía tasa de aprobación de menos de 5%, o sea, dentro del margen de error, po, weón. Yeah, he says he's like goes beyond political affiliation, Piñera's memory. Yeah, which is true. When you manage to have a 95% disapproval rating, when your approval rating is literally within the margin of error, you have succeeded in uniting the country against you. Yeah, well, at the moment, the this yeah, you came in after I talked about this, but the media in Chile are so obsessed with trying to make Piñera sound like a good person, which is hard. You have to omit basically his entire biography. That they're not even talking about these wildfires. And these wildfires, as I pointed out, I mean, it bears repeating. Chile is like California in a lot of ways. Like, topographically, it looks like upside down California. The north of Chile looks like the south of California and vice versa. It's also extremely seismic, and it's also on fire much of the time. And despite this, you have huge amounts of money that are invested in like fighter and bomber planes that the military buy from the U.S. But no money goes to getting things like super tankers and firefighting equipment. And on top of that, see these private companies that are like foreign owned, that own the motorways in Chile. They charge tolls. And they do not make an exception for emergency services. So, like, so when these fires happen, if the motherfuckers don't have exact change, they can get holed up at a toll station. I mean, there have been cases where, like, the firefighters have just refused to even pay that any notice and just driven right through it, and then they end up with, like, charges against them. They end up catching charges over this shit. So, I mean, right now there's just a lot of distraction from that because everybody is obsessed with, like, trying to make Piñera sound like somebody whose death anyone would mourn. Like any non-ghoul would mourn.
Tremendamente recordado. Eso es lo primero. Y lo segundo, si hacemos ya un doble clic en el sector político, obviamente, que es el líder más importante que ha tenido la derecha sin duda.
Sí, bueno, el segundo más importante podría decirse, porque, bueno, al final pisó donde ya había pisado Pinochet.
Creo que haber sido 2 veces presidente de la República, creo que haber enfrentado situaciones complejísimas como el terremoto o la pandemia, por decir dos situaciones complejas.
Es interesante, es realmente interesante que hablan del terremoto de 2010. Hablan de la pandemia, donde su gestión, insisto, fue nefasta. Fue terrible, fue, bueno, hay que decirlo, hubiera merecido una querella aparte por homicidio calificado por la manera en que no hizo nada por proteger a la gente de la pandemia. Pero no dice nada. Habla de situaciones complejísimas que enfrentó como presidente y nadie habla del estallido social. Nadie habla de la revuelta. Nadie habla de eso. Y una wea que vengo diciendo desde hace, bueno, desde la última campaña electoral presidencial en Chile, es que la meta principal de la clase dirigente en Chile hoy es borrar el legado de la revuelta, borrar de la memoria todo ese sentido de poder y de organización que tuviera tanta gente durante tanto tiempo, y restablecer la capacidad disuasiva del terror estatal, que perdió gran parte de su capacidad disuasiva gracias a la primera línea, gracias a tanta gente valiosa, valiente, que todos los días se enfrentara a los pacos y los milicos y los retara de frente. Y ahora, bueno, habla de las situaciones complejísimas que enfrentó este weón nefasto y no habla para nada de de la revuelta. It's fascinating. Like, he's just talking about these really complex situations that Piñera faced as president. And the ones that get mentioned are an earthquake back in 2010. 33 miners getting trapped, which he's getting, like, the credit for rescuing, even though he didn't. And, like, yeah, I mean, he's just getting credit for the fact that he was president at the time, and understood that this would be good for his personal brand. And he's talking about the pandemic, which, I mean, his handling of that was absolutely disastrous and cost a lot of lives, because he didn't give a fuck. I mean, the pandemic for Piñera was his salvation. The pandemic, like the military police and the army and the air force and the fucking navy together could not shut down the rebellion. But what did was people realizing that if they were going to stay out in the streets in those early days when nobody was quite sure whether masks were going to help and how much and what exactly they were dealing with, everybody wanted to make sure that they kept each other safe. And so they stayed inside. The government wasn't helping. The government wasn't doing shit for them, so they protected each other. That was what cleared the streets. Nothing else. Nothing else did. Now, so what's interesting is the one complex situation, la situación complejísima that he faced that they don't want to talk about is the rebellion. They do not want to talk about that at all.
Desde el punto de vista logístico, operativo, él era experto en eso, una persona que estaba en cada detalle. Yo en lo personal tengo los mejores recuerdos de ese periodo, tanto como alcalde, como ministro también, por supuesto, estar ya en el comité político, pero creo que hay un gran aprendizaje de haber trabajado a su lado, creo que somos...
Es la misma, bueno, estas son imágenes de la investidura del weón como presidente la segunda vez. No muestran nada de, bueno, por ejemplo, de la época de la revuelta, y parece que es el tema tabú, es el tema prohibido, que no se permite hablar bajo ninguna circunstancia de la revuelta.
Todos los que trabajamos a su lado somos mejores profesionales y mejores personas a partir de esa experiencia. Fue una experiencia de verdad muy compleja por el momento que se vivía, pero que en definitiva deja huella. Y yo creo que eso es
sí, deja huella, eso sí. Por ejemplo, deja huella en los ojos de mucha gente que hoy día no puede ver, gracias a los pacos, con su política de mutilación dolosa, disparándole balines, escopeta en los ojos a la gente, weón.
Temas técnicos que por supuesto uno podría hacer un listado de todas las cosas que por supuesto se hicieron en su gobierno.
Sí, ahora él se mantuvo muy activo políticamente hasta el último momento, ¿no? Participando, opinando en la contingencia. Hay quienes incluso lo veían como un eventual candidato a la presidencia por tercera vez.
Menos mal, weón. Menos mal que murió este culiao. Otra vez candidato a la presidencia. ¿Cómo? Esta clase dirigente no tiene otra idea más que repetir y repetir y repetir. Y ahora que se murió Piñera, a lo mejor, bueno, va a ser candidato el negro Piñera. O el José, weón. Like, they're talking about, he's kept on having opinions about current events since leaving office, and, like, nobody wants to hear his fucking opinions, for one thing. And for another thing, and she goes, like, some people have even been talking about him being, like, a candidate for president again, and it's like, wow, a bullet was seriously dodged. Yeah, at least that's not gonna happen.
¿Misma percepción usted de lo que fue al menos los últimos meses en que lo vimos ahí en actividad?
O sea, desde que salimos
They just repeat it. It's the same fucking video over and over again on the bottom right there, on the bottom left there.
moneda, él por lo menos a muchos de los ex ministros y ministras, subsecretarios, nos invitaba a su oficina, a almuerzo permanente, a un café, a una conversación. Y la verdad es que si uno lo miraba y no tomaba la temporalidad de lo que estaba mirando, uno veía ahí el mismo...
Like, seriously, they're just gonna keep showing the same shit. Van a seguir mostrando esta misma weá.
mismo ritmo que él tenía como cuando era presidente de la República. Lo que pasa es que obviamente las circunstancias eran distintas, pero él mantenía su blog, mantenía su regla, sus lápices Bic, subrayaba, leía todo, pedía más artículos, pedía más información, estaba al pendiente de todo lo que ocurría. Y por supuesto, cuando tuvimos alguna situación compleja como los incendios de hace exactamente un año, él nos pidió que fuéramos a la moneda.
Otra vez, hablando de situaciones complejas y no se menciona la revuelta. This is going to be like the really hard drinking game for this. I can already tell. Is like this is the teetotalers drinking game. Is anyone going to mention the 2019 uprising that lasted through 2020 and never really, I mean, and the only thing that stopped it was the pandemic. Like there is footage of Piñera during the pandemic visually just visibly overjoyed because it was the streets were empty and it was the very first time in months and months that he was able to actually just walk down the street without people like screaming at him and throwing shit at him, because he is just like a pretty universal hate figure.
Aportar lo que nosotros habíamos aprendido en ese momento y fuimos a la moneda y él lideró eso y hoy día también estaba muy preocupado de lo que ocurría, por supuesto, en la quinta región. Así que estamos hablando de una persona.
He says we're worried, of course, about what's going on in the fifth region. It's like maybe we should be talking about that more. Like, I mean, it's you could just tell. Like he gets this asshole. This asshole gets 3 days of national mourning. The people who including like family and friends of mine, I should know, like I know people who are who are like indirectly personally affected by this shit because it is that huge a thing. God, they're gonna be lucky if they get like a fucking chocolate bar.
Persona que efectivamente, tal como tú lo dices, nunca, no es que terminó su periodo, su mandato y se fue a descansar, a tomar sol. Él estaba absolutamente al día de.
Ojalá, weón. Ojalá hubiera terminado su mandato y ojalá se hubiera ido a descansar en cana, weón. Porque fue, bueno, ni que hablar del Banco de Talca y toda esa historia antigua, weón. Por tanta tortura, tanto asesinato, tanta violencia sexual sistemática cometida por lo opaco de él, por lo milico de él. Y bueno, este weón, estando en cana, estaría vivo el día de hoy. Hasta hoy estaría vivo. La impunidad lo mató.
Todo y el ritmo que tenía. Ahora, él lo dijo públicamente.
What, Piñera? No. No, he was elected in a bogus election that was boycotted by the majority of the population, as elections generally are in Chile. Like, the overwhelming majority of the population refuses to participate because they are just an absolute joke.
Muchas veces. Él no quería volver a ser candidato. Ahora, nosotros
Menos mal.
siempre lo molestábamos un poco, ¿cierto? En los chats o en privado, que a lo mejor sí quería, pero la verdad es que siempre nos negó esa.
He said, he would joke in private that maybe he actually did want to be a candidate again, but in public he'd always deny it, and it's like, good, thank fuck.
Esa posibilidad de decirnos que sí, pero él tenía un liderazgo.
Like, they're literally only showing. Okay, this is his party, that Renovación Nacional, one of the various pro-dictatorship parties that was formed in the 80s, and this is his inauguration. This is his like condolence book that people are signing.
Natural en nuestro sector político, un liderazgo.
I mean, in a sense, you could say the entire existing regime was installed in a coup in 1973. Because nothing fundamentally has changed since then, in terms of the way, I mean, since all the massive privatizations and shit like that, it has just followed that general course since then, and there's just been a general consensus amongst the political class to continue doing it that way. So, I mean, in a way, you could say that all these motherfuckers were installed in that coup, that none of them would have had a chance if that coup hadn't succeeded. Because politics in Chile would be totally different if it weren't for that.
que unía, que cuando él convocaba nadie se restaba, y la verdad es que creo que ese tipo de liderazgo se va a echar mucho de menos. Queda un gran vacío en la centro derecha en Chile.
Rodrigo, usted lo decía, lo culminó a asistir a la moneda, a ayudar lo que se pudiese. ¿Cómo lo veía también esa relación y esa querer actuar tal vez del
All their show. What I mean, this is just total. They're just whitewashing his image here, because all they're showing is they're not showing. They didn't put together like a clip show that I could put together in less than an hour, and that they with their staff could easily do quicker, of like major events during his two presidencies. They could have done something like that. That's kind of a standard thing to do. But instead, the thing is, they don't. There's an understanding. Everybody knows that nobody should really dwell too much on what he actually did during his two presidencies, because it was bad. Because it is. Oh, yeah, they're all the political heirs of Pinochet. The whole system is the political heir of Pinochet. And, I mean, that was a big part of the rebellion. I mean, the first slogan in the early days of the rebellion was, it's not 30 pesos, it's 30 years. Referring to the fact that, you know, it isn't this one increase. It's the fact that for 30 years, people have been waiting for this, like, transition of democracy to actually arrive at democracy, to actually undo all the horrible shit that Pinochet did to the social and economic and political system, and all they get over and over again is a political class who are quite happy to keep it exactly the same, and an electoral system that guarantees that those are the only people who will ever get in.
Presidente Piñera, sobre todo cuando en el gobierno había un sector que lo resistía muchísimo.
Un sector que lo resistía muchísimo. Okay, here we go. He says there's one segment of society that resisted him a lot.
Cosas que pasaron, además de la diferencia política, cosas que pasaron durante su administración.
La verdad es que yo te soy bien sincero, yo las veces que él ofrecía ayuda era una ayuda sincera. Yo creo que él no estaba con esa calculadora chica y tal vez...
No está con la calculadora chica. Bueno, se trata de un billonario. La única wea en que piensa es su calculadora chica, para saber cuánto valor, cuánta plusvalía le puede sacar a los trabajadores.
¿Ves? Y mira lo que te voy a decir, y en muy poca proporción nos pasa a nosotros los que estuvimos un año y medio, no sé, yo estuve un año y medio como ministro de Interior. Uno desarrolla cierta empatía republicana, cierta empatía...
I mean, if you look at this guy smiling, Piñera here, he's the one who's getting the sash. There, I mean, there isn't... I've never seen him smile in a way that doesn't look a little bit sinister.
El Estado, con el cargo, con las responsabilidades. Cuando uno, a mí me convidan a hablar, por ejemplo, en materia de seguridad, obviamente que uno puede tener una visión crítica, uno puede tener una mirada distinta, pero uno sabe lo que se sufre ahí, uno sabe lo que se sufre en ese palacio de la...
¿Sabe lo que se sufre en ese Palacio de la Moneda?
¿Sabe lo que se sufre en un Ministerio de Interior?
Sí, claro, lo que sufren los ministros y presidentes, weón. El sufrimiento que se vive en la moneda, weón. Ah, sí, eso es el sufrimiento de verdad. Nada que ver con la pobla, nada que ver con los narcos, weón, que reciben armas de los pacos para poder dominar la bola, para ganar plata con su negocio nefasto. Nada que ver con los guetos verticales, nada que ver con el sufrimiento de los pescadores artesanales en Aysén, en Coyhaique, lo que sea. Nada que ver. El sufrimiento de verdad, weón, el sufrimiento de verdad se encuentra en la moneda, weón.
En un segundo piso, en un sillón presidencial, y yo creo que él lo tenía más claro que nadie. Y como él sabía lo que se sufría ahí, obviamente dejaba de lado cualquier diferencia mezquina. Hay que recordar
Diferencia mezquina.
que cuando el
Sí, claro.
presidente
Sí, bueno, porque, bueno, tiene un montaje para todo Chile.
Boris lo invitó, ¿cierto?, a viajar
A
en el
Paraguay.
avión para Uruguay. Él no lo dudó, muchos le preguntábamos en el chat ahí, oye, presidente, cuente detalles. No, me invitó y fui. La verdad es que no hubo mayor comentario al respecto. Y yo creo que una visión republicana, de estadista,
Oh, de estadista, claro. Sí, un delincuente muerto se convierte en estadista.
como él tenía, la verdad es que se va a echar mucho de menos. Independientemente del sector político, yo creo que una de sus grandes virtudes era justamente que él tenía muy claro lo que era la responsabilidad del cargo. Y en esa responsabilidad
Sí, bueno, tenía una idea muy clara y era lucrar, era simplemente lucrar y reprimir.
no se perdía. Si había que ayudar, se ayudaba, si había que estar para una firma, para poder hacer una reunión respecto a un tema determinado, él siempre, como él
And like, God, I mean, this is such the most uninspiring eulogy ever. It's like he knew what the responsibilities of the job was. He knew that sometimes you got to go and sign a thing, and sometimes you got to be there for meetings and stuff. And it's like, wait, this is the best thing you can say about this jabroni? That he was made time for like the fucking meetings and signatures that the job required?
también convocó, cuando fue presidente, no hay que
Sí,
ir muy
es
lejos, él
verdad.
convocó a múltiples actividades, a expresidentes o a exministros respecto a distintos temas y sacó adelante. Lo que pasa es que hoy día está un poquito desvalorizado esto del diálogo, esto de hablar con quien piensa distinto, está un poquito
Ah, el diálogo, sí, claro, el diálogo de Piñera, que bueno, él dialogaba a través de un Paco, a través de los milicos. Esa fue su forma de dialogar, por el montaje. Like, I mean, he's talking about like how Piñera was all about dialogue, and it's like, fuck you. No, he wasn't. I mean, his idea of dialogue was to send the fucking military and the police out to attack people, and occasionally to stitch people up in ridiculous stitch ups that fell apart completely the minute they went to court.
la paja, porque es un signo lamentablemente de debilidad. Él luchó hasta el final para que el diálogo y poder llegar a
Muy bien.
acuerdos fuese la norma.
Bien, Rodrigo.
Y para que el diálogo fuese la norma, weón. ¿Y cuánto dialogaba con los presos políticos mapuche en huelga de hambre? He fought for dialogue to become the norm. I mean, it's like, what in the fuck? Where? I mean, like, these. How is lightning not striking them when they say this shit?
Yo hablo a mi título personal. No lo conocí
Vamos de
personalmente.
inmediato a
Para la
escuchar
pandemia sí me tocó. Yo soy experto en
vamos a escuchar
prevención de
al presidente
riesgo.
Gabriel Boric las declaraciones que entrega.
Y enluta como país
hang on.
en circunstancias especialmente difíciles.
Let me get back to reaction photo. That video is over. Wow, I wonder if the rest of them. I wonder if the rest of them are going to completely avoid the uprising as well. A ver, expresidente, tras desplomarse helicóptero, confirma el fallecimiento, muere, decreta el luto nacional. Tutati. Diario El Comercio de Perú. El funeral de Piñera. Ah, no, 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 no. A ver, algo. Ah, primeras reacciones de político a la muerte de Sebastián Piñera. Se va un líder. Líder in Chile is also a Walmart. First reactions from politicians to the death of Sebastián Piñera. Let's have a look at this. This is going to be bad. This is going to, yeah, I mean, we will earn the hate. Oh, come on. Piñera, conche tu madre, asesino, igual que Pinochet. I'm actually trying my hand at composing. I'm composing a requiem for Piñera. I've never done that before. I've listened to a lot of classical music. I have never ever tried to compose it.
Bueno, esto ocurrió recién, senador, ¿ha tenido alguna información? Bueno, esto ocurrió recién, senador, ¿ha tenido alguna información respecto a lo que va a ocurrir ahora próximamente?
Bueno, a ver, primero no tengo palabras para escribir lo consternados que estamos.
¿Quién es este weón?
Ha partido un gran líder, un gran presidente,
Un gran presidente.
amigo. Yo me siento muy cercano al presidente Piñera y la verdad es que yo creo que con el tiempo se va a también reconocer y valorar lo que fue su gobierno.
Sí, con el tiempo. O sea, el tiempo necesario para olvidarse de lo que fue su gobierno. Porque lo que no se están haciendo, lo que no se está haciendo en este supuesto reportaje es recalcar lo que fue el gobierno de él. No se está mencionando nada, weón.
Y la verdad es que como también expresidente de su partido, la verdad es que me siento profundamente ligado en las ideas, en las visiones y
¿A que no reconozco a este loco?
en los sueños que él tenía para Chile. Yo de verdad quiero decirlo con todo
He's a senator, but I don't recognize him.
no estoy hablando solamente de la partida de un expresidente, la partida de un amigo y yo
Los títulos con
quiero
el
mandarle
nombre,
a toda la familia, a la familia Renovación Nacional, a la familia Chile Vamos, a todos aquellos que quisieron, que compartieron.
Like supposedly, Boric, as I was saying, Boric had actually talked a great game early on about how he was going to make sure that Piñera got put on trial for the atrocities he committed during his rule, during the rebellion and everything. Which went in, oddly, I think you weren't there. You might want to actually check out the VOD after this and look at the first 15 minutes, because I go into some detail about all that. And to get an idea of why this is just so fucking buck wild to hear all these people talking about him like he was some sort of wonderful person.
Que compartieron sueños y esperanzas con él. Un abrazo enorme y por supuesto también a la familia, a toda y cada una de ellos.
¿Ha tenido alguna información, algún contacto?
I can't imagine that Boric is very happy to have this be constantly shown. Him, everything that shows him looking cordially, just destroys a little bit more of what little credibility he has with the people whose vote he needs.
¿Contacto con algún cercano del
Sí,
expresidente?
hemos estado en contacto y estábamos a la espera de que hubiese un error de la información, pero ya la noticia está confirmada y por supuesto dramático. No alcanzó, la información que tenemos no alcanzó a soltar su cinturón de seguridad y cayó capotó en el helicóptero que él pilotaba, el líder.
Okay.
La merecemos por Viña, por Quilpué, por Villa Alemana, se suma también el dueño
al senador para también conocer del senador Francisco Chaguán acá desde el Olivar.
Francisco Chaguán, okay.
Claro, obviamente.
Yeah, another far right. They call him centro derecha, center right, but the thing is that center right starts with the concertación. This is far right.
Estamos con el tema de la contingencia de los incendios y una vez conocida esta noticia, entonces nos acercamos al senador para también conocer su palabra como expresidente de Renovación Nacional, Patricio.
Exactamente. Muchas gracias, Roberto, ahí por este contacto, por facilitarnos también la conversación con el senador Francisco Chaguán, ahí desde la región de Valparaíso. En lo que es también en medio de las emergencias se da esta noticia, la lamentable muerte del expresidente Sebastián
Casa Sebastián Piñera en Las Condes. Las Condes is one of the richest, whitest places in Chile. There are like basically the entire like rich white peopledom of Chile live in 3 districts in Santiago. Las Condes is one of the big ones. And it is low key, it is absolutely a kind of a weird experience, I have to say, because it is like so aggressively blonde. I've not actually seen that. Like I've been to some very white intensive areas of the US and other places, but as aggressively white as the rich part of Santiago, I have not seen elsewhere. It is like the fucking children of the corn.
Piñera en estos momentos ha sido confirmado primero por parte de su equipo, la oficina del presidente Piñera y el gobierno hace algunos minutos justamente a través de la ministra de Interior Carolina Toa en nuestro país. En unos próximos días también aquí hay una situación.
Ya la oficina del presidente Javier Milei ha lamentado el fallecimiento de...
Yeah, I don't know if you got the news from Javier Milei. This reminded me. Okay, Javier Milei, the far right asshole who's president of Argentina, mostly kind of by default. Okay, he had been trying to push through what he calls the omnibus law, la ley omnibus, which is supposed to basically give him dictatorial powers so that he can just kind of gift the entire, like, totally asset strip Argentina and hand it over to his friends and to, like, US corporations and shit. And it has totally fallen apart. The entire thing has collapsed. And now the assholes in his party are sort of falling apart in recriminations and mutual accusations and stuff.
Sebastián Piñera, también se ha decretado ahí un minuto de silencio en el
Un minuto de silencio, ni cagando, weón.
Mauricio Macri, expresidente de Argentina, también expresando sus condolencias.
Oh, well, of course Macri would be. Yeah, because Macri is just another Piñera. He's just another rich fuck whose entire political career is dedicated to handing over state assets to guys like himself.
Conmoción por esta noticia de la muerte del expresidente Sebastián Piñera. Recordemos que él desde hace muchos años pilotaba helicópteros, él aprovechaba la temporada estival precisamente
y de su
para
impunidad
acumular las horas de vuelo que son necesarias para mantener la licencia para estar ahí en los helicópteros y
menos mal.
Seguramente fue en ese contexto en que finalmente ocurre lo del día de hoy, mientras está también a la espera de conocer todo lo que viene de aquí en...
Like, I mean, the images they're showing, it's just him sort of standing there with Boric, talking about some shit, like, basically just like West Wing footage here, practically, in style, and then him at a thing telling people to get their flu jabs. I mean... There is no attempt to remind people of what he actually did as president.
Adelante, tiene que ser un funeral de Estado. Lo último que vimos en este mismo sentido, creo, fue con la muerte del expresidente Patricio Aylwin.
Yeah, Patricio Aylwin, who, I mean, they also tried to make it a whole big state funeral do for Aylwin, and nobody showed up for it. Nobody gave a fuck, because... Aylwin, I mean, everybody, like, oh, well, like, let's say, like, people who aren't rich in Chile recognize that Aylwin was a big part of why things still suck for them now.
Por lo tanto, uno puede suponer que va a ser más o menos eso lo que vamos a ver en los próximos días, pero sin duda que en Renovación Nacional es donde hay un impacto muy grande, donde fue militante separatista.
Vamos a ver 2 veces presidente de la Nación. Estamos revisando las distintas imágenes de un expresidente Piñera 2 veces.
Yeah, they're going through the various images of him, and somehow, I mean, it's all of this stuff, like, absolutely nothing. Are they going to show us anything? Okay, who else are they going to talk to? Let's see, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. The neo-Nazi José Antonio Cast calls him a great public servant. Oh, another fascist. Ah, sí, la tristeza es muy profunda. Se nos ha ido inesperadamente el presidente Sebastián Piñera. Oh, conte su madre. It's like all the worst people in Chile. Evelyn Matei, she's also fash. Just one shitty person after another. Let me see, who else we got? And I think we already heard from him. Somebody, I didn't see who, claimed that Piñera was the closest thing. Oh, Javier Macaya, presidente de la UDI. But actually, it's 4 minutes to the hour. We are gonna have to be wrapping up fairly quickly, fairly soon at this point. We can continue with this tomorrow if people are interested, or we can go back to our like usual stuff. I am up for either one. Thank you to everyone who joined. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was interesting and entertaining and informative and stuff. And if you enjoy the stream, please consider supporting the stream with a tip or whatever if you can. And if you can't, I totally understand because everybody's fucked right now. And I wouldn't want anyone to part with anything they can't part with. So, yeah. Have a good night, and I will be back at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time to continue the JabroniCon. And at 4:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, I will be doing my language stream on hyperpolyglotting with Elise. That's twitch.tv/hyperpolyglotting. We'll talk about language shit and play some chess and the usual things. Have a good night.